One of California's most feared serial rapists is on the move after striking terror in the hearts of hundreds. A mysterious man breaks into houses in the dead of night, shining flashlights into the faces of his victims. Through clenched teeth behind a ski mask, he tells the women to tie up their partners with shoelaces, and then he sexually assaults the woman. He spends hours inside their homes, eating their food, drinking their beer, relaxing, and just when they think he's gone, he walks back into the room and says, if they move, he'll kill them. Then, as quickly as he entered their lives, he's gone. The East Area rapist terrorized men, women, and children throughout Sacramento, Stockton, Modesto, Contra Costa County, and Northern California throughout 1976, 77, 78, and 1979. He sexually assaulted more than 50 women, killed 2 people in Sacramento, and then fled without a trace. On this week's episode of Two Crime Newsies, we find out where he strikes next. Hi, everyone. I'm Jen.
I'm Tina.
And before we get into this episode, we want all those young listeners, those teenagers and below, to go watch Bluey, go watch something else, because this is not meant for your ears.
Respectfully, get out of here.
Yeah. I appreciate you being here, but now it's time to shoo shoo.
Mm-hmm.
So we are talking about the East Area rapist, who is also known as the original Night Stalker, who is known as the Visalia Ransacker, who is then later on known as the Golden State Killer.
But
Now,
we call him
the Weasel. Why do we call him the Weasel?
because he's Weasley.
Because he's Weasley, and we don't want to give this dude any credit. Like, he's a terrible human being.
He probably likes his little nickname.
We finished up last week's episode in Northern California, and now we move to Southern California. It's October 1979, and the Weasel breaks into the house of a couple in the town of Goleta, which is in Santa Barbara County. He ties them up with pieces of pre-cut rope, which we know all too well from the Weasel's activity in Northern California. And he puts the woman into the living room and the man into the bedroom. Now, the man was able to untie his ankles, and he ran into the yard for help. Apparently, the Weasel got kind of scared, and he left the scene on a stolen bicycle. Now, I think this is where it gets cool. There is an FBI agent living next door to these people, and he hears this couple screaming for help, and he runs after the Weasel, who at this time is known as the original Night Stalker, but we don't want to give him any credit. Not to be confused with Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, who is down in LA later on. FBI agent runs after him, and the Weasel just gets away. The woman reported to the police that she heard him at the fridge saying to himself, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. Over and over again, which is something we talked about in the Sacramento case, where both Mary Ellen O'Toole, who was a former FBI criminal profiler, such a cool chick, and Paul Holes, who we love, were saying that he was just trying to get people to think he is not mentally all there, and lead police kind of on a wrong path to catch him. So less than 2 months later, okay, the Weasel is back. It's 2 nights, or I guess 1 night. I always have a hard time with this with New Year's. So the crime occurred on December 30th, 1979. So what would you say that? 1 day before New Year's?
That was 1 day before New Year's Eve.
The whole New Year's thing always gets me. It confuses me. I know it happens on
December 31st is New Year's Eve, and then the New Year is January 1st.
I know. It confuses me.
Oh, boy. I'm bad at math. You're bad with dates. We've got issues.
Yeah. December 30th, 1979, the Weasel breaks in the house of Dr. Robert Offerman and Dr. Deborah Manning, and he unalives them. He shoots them in their Goleta house. Now, Goleta, again, is in Santa Barbara County. The neighbors report hearing the gunshots around 3 in the morning.
But no one calls anyone because they don't know if that's gunshots or fireworks or whatever.
Have you ever experienced that, though? So my husband and I were laying in bed a couple of weeks ago. And it's 11 p.m. and all of a sudden we hear this like pop, 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 pop. And like we live in a pretty good neighborhood. And we're like, is that gunshots? And then a couple of minutes later we hear pop, 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 pop. And I didn't call anybody, to be completely honest.
Yeah, because you don't know what it is.
I don't know what it is.
What are you calling about? I was staying with my parents recently, and they live out in the country where there's hunters and stuff.
Yeah.
And I heard my parents were asleep, and I was getting ready for bed, and I heard the pop, pop, pop.
Mm-hmm.
There was about a dozen in a row, and then I heard nothing. No, just silence. But it was around 10:30 at night. I don't think there's hunters around 10:30 at night.
I don't think so either.
So I asked my mom about it the next day, and she said, yeah, we don't know what that is. We do hear it periodically between the hours of 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. or 3:30 a.m. My dad wakes up real early. He wakes up around the 3-4 o'clock hour, and sometimes he hears them early in the morning.
That's so
it can be a hunter. It's dark. How are you hunting? And it's a variety of pops in a row. And she says, we don't know what to do because if we call, we don't even know what we're calling. We're out in the country. We don't know where they're coming from. Are they coming from the left, the right, the front, the back? Where are they coming from?
And I feel like, though, that's why the neighbors, so they heard the gunshots at 3 a.m., but they didn't call police because it's just like our situation. Like you hear things, but
you don't know if it's, and a lot of the times it is fireworks. I've heard the pop, looked out the window, and I've seen fireworks.
Random times of the year, which is something I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, it's annoying.
Yeah. Dr. Offerman and Dr. Deborah Manning are shot. Both are tied up, and it looks like, according to police, it looks like Dr. Offerman managed to get loose and go after the suspect. He went after the weasel. And then the weasel shot him, and then he executed Dr. Manning, is what the show says. We haven't said what show we're watching.
Well, that's important.
Yeah. So we are talking about this episode. We watched Unmasking a Killer. I watched it on Max. It's a show that premiered in 2018.
It's a 7-episode series.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a long one.
It was a long one. And each one of the episodes, were 45 minutes-ish?
Around, yeah.
Yeah. So it took a while.
Mm-hmm.
In the show, they speak to Detective Larry Crompton, who was in the Contra Costa County Sheriff's Department.
Woo, that's a mouthful.
It is. So Contra Costa County is a county that we talked about last episode up in Northern California around the Bay Area, where some of the weasel sexual assault cases happen. Now, Detective Larry Crompton says that it took a few months for anyone to find out that there had been a double homicide. And at the same time that the homicide had taken place, he was sent down to Santa Barbara County to take some kind of like law enforcement class. At that meeting, at that training, Detective Larry says he spoke to a detective from the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department about their crimes. And so they were just kind of passing information back and forth about the Contra Costa County sexual assault cases and the similarity between those and the Santa Barbara cases about the victims being tied up, the ropes or the shoestring. So Detective Larry thought that there might be a link between these two, but he couldn't prove it. And Detective Larry Crompton even says that his own department didn't believe him when he told them that he suspected a link.
Frustrating.
So frustrating. So we fast forward to March 13th of 1980 when the weasel broke into the house of Charlene Smith and Lyman Smith in Ventura, again, Santa Barbara County. Charlene, it's reported, was sexually assaulted, and then both of them were beaten with a piece of wood that the show suspects, and I guess investigators suspect, was grabbed from a wood pile outside of their home. Their wrists and their ankles showed signs of being tied up, which is kind of what led investigators to think they might have some kind of spree going on in Southern California. Lyman's son found Charlene and Lyman a couple of days later, and the house had been torn apart, but there was no jewelry missing. And it didn't look like a burglary, and there were no signs of forced entry.
Just ransacking.
Ransacking.
So again, starting with the ransacking and
Mhm.
going to the sexual assaults. Now it's all of it.
Now
Sexual assault, ransacking, and unalives.
And it's this like progression of things getting heftier.
Right.
You know, we then go to August of 1980, where the weasel again broke into a house. And he broke into the house of Keith Harrington and Patricia Harrington in Dana Point. Now, Patrice is sexually assaulted, and then again, both were beaten to death. There again was evidence that both had their wrists and their ankles were tied up. Now, the brothers of Keith were interviewed, and we will hear from them later on in the show as well, multiple times, because they played a really big part in the eventual capture of the weasel. They state that Patrice and Keith were newlyweds. They had no enemies. They had no idea why this was done to their loved ones because they were just good people. So again, there's this other one, same MO, modus operandi. You hear that? Big words.
Oh, look at you.
I know.
I always think of, what's the word I used for motive? Never mind. I wrote it down and now I'm looking at your notes instead of mine, and we both have like 20 pages of notes here.
Yeah, this is a lot to get through. Fast forward again to February 6th, 1981, when a lady named Manuela Whithume, I think I'm saying that last name right, she was sexually assaulted and killed in her Irvine home. Again, her body showed signs of being tied up. And one of the things with Manuela was that her husband, on the night this occurred, had been in the hospital. He was sick and he was in the hospital, and she had gone and visited him in the hospital. And she gets home, she spends the night at home, and then this happens. Now, Mary Ellen O'Toole, who's the former FBI profiler who we talked a lot about, says that she believes that the weasel planned these things ahead of time. In this attack, listen to this. Oh, we talked about the TV last episode too.
Yes, we did.
So in this attack, there was a TV outside in the backyard next to a fence. And it's believed that that TV had been from inside Manuela's home. So he had placed this TV out back in case he needed to make some kind of quick getaway, which is something he did in the Northern California cases.
Or to make it look like a burglary.
Or to make it look like a burglary.
Like he was taking a TV and then just decided to drop it on his way out.
Ugh. So Mary Ellen O'Toole believes he walked around the house for hours before the murders. He had everything that he would need to kill them at the house. He familiarized himself with the house, which is something we know that he did in Northern California.
Yes.
He would go in beforehand and set things up.
Mm-hmm.
And the victims would never have known that he was inside of their house, which that is absolutely terrifying.
Right.
Like, you come home and everything is in place. Like, nothing looks
Out of place.
out of place.
Yet someone had been there.
Terrifying. What happened with Manuela is, according to the show, a sleeping bag had been placed over her and then she had been beaten. And Mary Ellen O'Toole believes that this attack really showed his hatred. He wanted to destroy things that he hated, is what she says.
Mm-hmm.
He's a complete psychopath.
Complete.
Like, ugh. Then, again, a couple of months later, and this is the thing that I find interesting between the Northern California attacks and the Southern California attacks, is that there are gaps of months between the homicides in Southern California, whereas in Sacramento, Contra Costa County, Northern California, you have these things happening very quickly.
That's a very good point. Yeah, when he upped the ante, it slowed down, but still, it was more violent.
Mm-hmm. It was much more violent. And then you compare that to Visalia, which we also talked about in last episode, in the Visalia ransacking cases, where the weasel would break into houses and he would do up to 15 in a single month.
Right.
So here in SoCal, you have him doing one every couple of months. Like, it's not close together.
Right.
In February of 1981, Manuela is killed. And then in July of 1981, on July 27th, Sherry Domingo and Greg Sanchez were killed in their Goleta home. Now he's back in Goleta. They showed signs of being tied up. Both had been beaten to death. And then what was the thing that we called his?
His microorgan.
His microorgan. Then he used his microorgan to pleasure himself over.
Oh, just let's be careful here.
Yeah.
Let's just say he left a lot of his DNA at the scene.
Yes. So police and investigators believe that Greg, during this attack, went after the suspect and he was fighting him at the foot of the bed. There were signs of that at the scene, but that Greg was shot once in the cheek, but that didn't kill him. He continued going after the weasel. Go, Greg.
Right.
Seriously.
I know.
And somehow the weasel managed to get a hold of Greg, and that's when Greg was killed. Oh,
and
terrible.
And that was the end of it, we think. Between 1981 and 1986, 5 years, and nothing happens for 5 years.
That's a long time. And the show has a couple of theories. Mary Ellen O'Toole, the FBI criminal profile, said that something was going on in the weasel's life during this 5-year gap. Was he preoccupied with something else? Did he have a baby? Was he in prison? Was he in the military? Those are all things, are questions in this show. During this time frame, though, he was still fulfilling, I think, these fantasies of these things happening. Because, according to Paul, in 1982, so the last homicide happened in July of 81. And then in 1982, victim number 24 of the Sacramento sexual assault cases received a phone call at her place of work. She was working at Denny's in Rancho Cordova at the time.
Which is Sacramento area.
Yes. Rancho Cordova is kind of like one of those little neighborhoods inside of the city. You have some,
like a subdivision.
There you go. That's a good word.
Thank you.
Good word. So she gets a call at work. She goes and answers his phone. The caller is suspected to be the weasel because what he says. Go for it, Tina.
I just shivered.
Give me to read it.
The weasel said, "Remember me? I'm going to come over and F you again." And I don't really want to say what else he says.
No, I don't want to say the rest either.
It was just gross.
It's disgusting. The big thing that points out in all this is that at the time of the attack, the time that she was sexually assaulted, she had not been working at Denny's at the time of the attack in 1977. So she was not working at Denny's in 1977. She was working at Denny's in 1982. So he kept tabs on her.
For that long. Knew where she was working.
That's
years
petrifying.
Later. Oh,
that's terrifying. Like Paul says that this shows that he was not in police custody at the time because he wouldn't have been able to make that call.
Or it would have been a collect call and it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
That he could have been one of her customers, Paul says.
Mm-hmm. That's terrifying. And she would never have known.
He could have followed her to work or watched her, or she could have served him as a customer.
Never would have known.
Mm-mm.
That's terrifying.
Absolutely.
So that happens in 82. And remember, we're in that 5-year gap where nothing is happening. And we don't know what is happening in the weasel's life at this point.
But the weasel obviously isn't in jail. Well, in
He's
1982, he's not.
He's not in jail. On May 4th, 1986, the weasel is back. He's back. He's in Southern California. And 18-year-old Janelle Cruz is killed inside her Irvine house. This is an overly violent attack. She is beaten in the face and in the head. The family told police that there had been a pipe wrench that had been left at the back door, but it wasn't there when they responded. There had been ripped cloth all over her body. Her arms had been tied up. And the Orange County investigator who's interviewed on the show says that there was an unusually large amount of DNA left at the scene from his small appendage.
Thank you.
I think that's a good way of saying it.
Yeah.
Which an unusually large amount makes me gag.
Absolutely.
Yuck. And it shows, the investigator says that this individual was excited about what he was doing. In my notes, I wrote absolutely disgusting.
Psychotic.
Ugh, makes me gag. Gross.
And it's the last time we think that the weasel commits these types of crimes.
Yeah. This case, just, we don't know if in fact this was his last crime. We don't know if he went anywhere else. California investigators didn't know. We don't know why he stopped. Was he getting too old? Did he have some kind of issue where his small organ was not working anymore? We don't know any of these things.
He was gone or he eluded investigators, officers, law enforcement for 40 years. Over 40 years.
Over 40 years. Mary Ellen O'Toole has an idea that she says, and Paul too in the show states, that they don't think that he totally gave up on everything. They think that he was still prowling up until the day that he was eventually caught.
Wow.
They suspect that he was still peeping into houses, that he was still trying to get a little bit of that glory from when he would do these attacks. But Mary Ellen O'Toole thinks that potentially one of the reasons why he stopped after this attack was maybe he had a willing partner at home. Maybe he was into bondage and he had found somebody who was also into bondage. And so like part of that fantasy for him could be fulfilled on a willing partner. I don't know. We do know that the people who were his victims throughout the state of California, from Visalia to Sacramento to the Bay Area to Southern California, were all in middle class to upper middle class neighborhoods. We know that this was his comfort zone, meaning more than likely he was probably part of that socioeconomic group?
Right.
Is that what it's called?
I think so.
He blends in. He comes off as non-threatening. Mary Ellen O'Toole believes that there are probably more crimes out there that are linked to him, but that he acts so normal that even his family thinks he's normal.
There's no way. And I was thinking this the whole time. This guy cannot be normal. He's not normal. He's a psychopath. Someone knows something.
Someone knows something. And that, I think, is once we later on find out who this is, it's a question that I have in all of this, which we will address. Fast forward from 1986 to 1994. DNA is in its infancy. And Paul Holes is now working in Contra Costa County. And he suspects that DNA will one day solve this case.
This is a smart man.
If you haven't read Paul Holes' book, read Paul Holes' book. I wish he would write many, many more. And the cool thing, just a little plug for this book, is that it's not just cases that have been solved. He talks about things that are still open to this day in this book. So it's really interesting to see her. Anyway, the statute of limitations is over on the sexual assault cases in Contra Costa County in Sacramento. But Paul says he found some evidence on 3 of the cases and started testing it. Now, in his book, he talks about this, and he's kind of secretly working on this. He's working on it after hours.
It's a side project.
Because he believes that the hard science can't get this guy. That's when he reached out to Orange County if the East Area Rapist was the original Night Stalker, who we all call the Weasel. We are many, many years later in 2001. Paul Holes discovered that there was, in fact, a link between the East Area Rapist and the guy committing all the homicides, the original Night Stalker, down in Santa Barbara County. And this was done. There was a second sexual assault kit performed on one of these Southern California victims
that hadn't been touched yet or tested for DNA.
Had not been tested. And on a whim, that was run against, not on a whim, I guess Paul
he purposely was looking for it.
Yeah.
And it was hard to get DNA because they, I think over the years had been, since the 90s, had been trying to do this DNA testing. And so they were running low on DNA. And they found this rape kit that hadn't been touched. Okay, go on.
It links those cases to the DNA in Northern California, which is a huge breakthrough.
Absolutely.
It's a huge breakthrough. So that's in 2001. Now in 2002, Bruce Harrington, who we've talked about before, is one of Keith's brothers who was murdered in 1980. And he starts working on California Senate Bill 1242. Now, if you don't know about it, this is basically to get DNA from inmates who've been charged with violent crimes, and you can use reasonable force to get it. Now, before this, a murderer could say no to having his DNA taken, and the state was not allowed to collect it. So at the time, 34 states had all felon DNA databases, meaning that all felons had to provide their DNA for testing. California did not at this time. 2003, this is huge. This Senate Bill 1242 was passed in California, and the forcible collection of DNA from eligible inmates, now that means those convicted of murder, attempted murder, sexual assault, that kind of thing, became legal. So these guys in prison were not allowed to say, no, you can't take my DNA.
They had to give it, to give it. Mm-hmm.
Get over here. Let me swab your mouth. Now, at the time, because this guy, the weasel, had not killed anybody, had not broken into anybody that anybody knew in such a long time, they thought he was in prison. So this was a like, sweet, this is past. He's probably in prison right now. More than likely, if he was doing this, like he falls under this eligible inmates.
They thought they were going to catch him.
So they started collecting DNA. Turns out he was not in prison.
Nope, nothing found.
Nope. And so that's when Bruce, Keith's brother, who had been murdered, fought tooth and nail to try to expand this DNA database so that any felon had to have their DNA collected. This would later on become Prop 69, which was voted on and passed in 2004. Now, this was a huge win, not only in this case, but in other cases, because this exponentially grew the DNA database.
Right.
This helped so many people get caught. It helped people close cases. You had crimes that had been committed a long, long time ago and solve those and put an end and give families that like closure.
Right.
Except for all these families.
So we're making progress, but just not the progress needed for this case.
Mm-hmm. We heard nothing at all from the Vasily Ransacker, the East Area Rapist, the original Night Stalker, who was later coined by Michelle McNamara in 2013 as the Golden State Killer. We heard nothing until in 2013, Michelle McNamara basically reignited interest in this case. She wrote an article for LA Magazine that got people talking. So much so that she ended up writing a book.
She was working with Paul Holes too.
She was.
Yeah.
There's a whole documentary on this. It's called I'll Be Gone in the Dark. And it's so good. It's so good. And Paul also is interviewed. They were passing information back and forth. And in that documentary, Paul was like, I was questioning her. She's a journalist. And I told her some things, kind of just like test her out and see if like she would kind of leak that. And she didn't. She kept it close to the vest. And he built that trust with her. Mm-hmm. And so Michelle McNamara wrote the book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark, one woman's obsession with the Golden State Killer, which was then later turned into a documentary by HBO Documentary Films. And I'm telling you, it's amazing. I've watched this show countless times. And you can even watch it now. We watched this Unmasking a Killer on Max, and it's also on Max.
Nice.
Go watch it. There were several theories about the weasel.
I love the theories. One of them is that he is in the medical field. He's supposedly intelligent. He could be a nurse or a doctor. Many of the victims had a medical background.
Not to mention, some of the victims also describe him as coming to the scene with a doctor's style bag.
That's right. Mm-hmm. One of the victims worked at a pharmacy. Some were medical students or worked at a doctor's office. And 2 of the victims were doctors. Another had recently been to the hospital before she was a victim. So they think maybe this weasel has a connection to the medical field. Another theory is the weasel a construction worker? At the time, the area that these things were happening at was booming with construction. Maybe he was following the trade and moving where the construction projects were.
There were traces of paint found at some of the scenes too.
In 2013, new evidence was released that showed in 2 cases small amounts of paint were recovered at the scene. So maybe he was a contractor painting a house that was under construction.
At the attack number 43, which occurred in Danville on December 9th, 1978, Paul Holes says that the East Area rapist ran onto some railroad tracks behind the house.
Oh, that's right.
And they found what they describe as the homework evidence, which leads to that construction worker theory. What investigators found was 2 pieces of paper where it looked like essays had been written. Now, on the 3rd piece of paper was a drawn diagram of what looked like a subdivision. And on the back of this map that was drawn out, on the center, looked like there was like a lake, and then you had streets, and you had little houses drawn onto it. And when you flip that piece of paper over, there was the word punishment written on it and the word melody crossed out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Paul on the show said that he had lots and lots of people look at this. It didn't lead anywhere. And that no development that looked like that was ever developed in the state of California.
So again, goes back to, did he try to throw this stuff out just to
like bait them into thinking
that it's something important when it's not?
Yeah.
Okay, the next theory is he was in the military, which this would allow him to move to military bases in the area.
Which Sacramento had 2 really big ones.
And he is described as being athletic, was seen with military-type boots. He knew how to use guns. Victims said he carried himself as a military man. He told one of his victims that she looked good at the O Club, which is a military term for officers club. Do you know what the O Club is?
Like, I heard about it on that Top Gun movie.
Okay.
But I feel like random people don't just walk around talking about O Clubs. Like, I heard about it on that Top Gun movie.
Right.
Well, you know, when he's like in there playing the piano.
Yes.
I'm not talking about the old one. I'm talking about the new one.
Right. The new one.
With what's his name?
I forget his name. Are you talking about Rooster? What is Rooster's name?
I don't know.
I have Miles Teller.
There you go.
It came to me.
Plus that dude from the new Twisters movies in it too.
Oh, I like him too. I forget his name also. Glenn Powell.
That's it.
Oh my gosh.
Look at you. You're on a roll.
Okay.
So they suspect that he might be military affiliated.
Or is he using these terms to throw them off to make them think he's in the military? And
just like the boat thing.
Just like the boat thing.
Which we talked about in the last episode.
However,
my voice is getting all crackly. Do you hear that?
Paul Holes thinks he was based in Sacramento, but attacked outside of Sacramento when he's away from where he's living. Mm-hmm. So maybe his job took him to the areas outside of Sacramento, which would explain all of the other crimes in the other places.
And a big thing with that is too that a lot of these crimes happen near highways. So it'd be an easy on-off the highway to get out of town or get wherever, to get back home quickly. Fast forward to June of 2016, when the FBI reopens the case and a $50,000 reward is offered for information leading to his arrest and conviction. Now, they believe that the Weasel is between 60 and 75 years old, and at this FBI press conference, they released 3 sketches by some of these witnesses who saw this guy back in the 70s. They say that he is a chameleon. He blends in, doesn't leave much behind.
Well, he does. There's no DNA on file in any of the criminal databases.
There you go. So, November 2017. So the case is officially reopened in June of 2016. Now, in November 2017, Paul Holes goes to Sacramento to meet with DA Anne-Marie Schubert about DNA.
They want to use the genealogy ones, the ones that
like
regular people use,
and like where you do your little swab and then you send it off and then you get your family tree.
That's right.
They want to do that. So what they do in January 2018, is Paul Holes uploads that DNA to a site called GEDmatch, G-E-D Match, which has DNA compiled by Ancestry DNA and other genealogy websites.
It's like one database that has
Everything.
information from all the other little databases.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. You get a list of matches, and the top of the list is the closest linked DNA, so the most common ancestor. So like, let's say I uploaded and I would get like my sister's match, for instance. So Paul says that they received matches on the 25th third cousins of the weasel. Like, this goes back all the way to the 1820s.
A great-great-grandparent level.
Yes, which is crazy. And they basically start working downwards to today about who is alive today. So they go back to this 1820s and start mapping out who goes where. They visit cemeteries throughout the country to get dates of birth, dates of death, and to get other information. Now, the show says that this guy's tree had over 1,000 people in it, but he's somewhere in that tree, and they know it. They were able to narrow down that tree of 1,000 people, and they did that by narrowing it down based on age, based on if it's a guy or a lady. Obviously, we know the women can be ruled out right away.
Right.
And one of these names on this list, and it's a long list, is somebody named Joseph James D'Angelo.
He fits the age.
He fits the age.
He lived in the area.
He lived in the area when he was younger. They knew that he had been in the military. And
big one, he had been a police officer. So you might think, that can't be that guy.
The way I see it, I'd be like, how could he be a police officer and then be committing all these crimes? Like, who has time as a police officer? You're busy all the time.
But all of the other things match. So they look into him further.
And Paul is basically like a dog with a bone. He is not letting this go. And to the point where he drove to D'Angelo's house and watched him. Paul says he retired the next day, but he continued to consult with police about this case.
Paul retired, right. But he still wanted to solve this thing.
All roads are slowly starting to lead to Joseph D'Angelo, but they need to get a DNA sample for him.
They're watching him. And they find that he's a 70-year-old man that moves like he's 20 years younger, like he's a 50-year-old. He matches the height description. Paul says they were not dealing with some frail man, that they have someone who is physically capable and still is a physical threat. So they have to be careful.
So they follow him one day to they describe it as a hobby shop, but on the show it shows the Hobby Lobby store. So
what is this guy doing at Hobby Lobby?
I have no
what
idea.
In the world is he doing at Hobby Lobby? Seriously.
I don't know. And he gets out of his car and walks into the store. Now, investigators pounce, basically, and get a swab from the door handle of the car because he touched it, so his DNA will be there. And so they get a swab. They send it off, and they're still watching D'Angelo. The DNA comes back, and it shows that the major profile from the swab matched the Golden State Killer, the weasel.
But they need a better sample.
They do. On April 23rd of 2018, it's trash day at D'Angelo's home. And the sheriff's department was able to take a tissue from his trash. And they were able to get 100% match.
Bingo.
They
know it's him.
So all night long, arrest warrants are written. They're getting ready. Like, they're going to go get him.
How exciting for them.
I know. I got chills. I really do. So it's April 24th of 2018. And Paul, the way he describes this on the show, it's amazing. So they're in the war room. He says they're in the war room, which in my mind, I'm just like, it's this conference room. You got all these police officers in there.
You got all this information posted everywhere. You got maps.
You got maps, not maps in the folder.
No. You got pinholes or push pins in the maps.
Yeah.
You've got string.
String?
Yeah, you know how
Oh,
in the
no.
TV shows, they have like a picture and then a string that leads to another picture connecting all the things. Okay. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's my war room fantasy.
So Paul says they're in the war room of the police department and they're listening to what's going on. And he's visualizing what's happening at D'Angelo's house. Now, D'Angelo lives in a like ranch style house in Sacramento. And
he lives in Sacramento.
He lives in Sacramento.
Where the East Area rapist has been criming or had been criming for how many years?
So long.
So long.
So long.
He's right there in the area.
He has not he terrorized it and then he went back. And it's just the way I see this, like he's reliving it. Like just living there, he's able to keep tabs on people. Like we know he keeps tabs on people.
How creepy.
April 24th, they go to D'Angelo's house in Sacramento.
They have to be careful.
They have to be super
He's got a lot of registered guns at his house, they said. And they don't want to shoot him, and they don't want him to shoot himself because they want to catch him.
They want to talk to him too. Like, you want to know. Plus, it's another thing. You want to find out what happened between 1986 and 2018. Like, what have you been doing, buddy?
Right. So they have to wait until he leaves his house.
No, he doesn't leave his house.
Right. But they want to wait until
they want to leave. Yeah. So he is out front of his house and he's working in his yard. In my mind, I see him, and the show shows pictures of him. Like, he's not a thin dude either. Like,
he's Hobby Lobbying it up outside of his house.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, he's like a husky guy, right?
Right.
Like he's, in my mind, he's pushing a lawnmower, he's edging, like that kind of thing. And Paul says that it looks like he's about to be done for the day to go back inside. And they don't want him to go inside.
No.
And so the green light is given. And Paul says, it's a go. And the arrest is about to happen. And Paul says that you can literally hear a pin drop in that room. Everybody's silent. And then all of a sudden over the radio, you hear suspect in custody. And there's applause. Like, there's eruption. More than 40 years of happiness at this point.
That the guy's finally caught.
So 44 years in total. He's in custody. Finally. They bring the weasel into the interrogation room. Like, everybody wants a piece of this guy. And he just sits there. He doesn't talk. He doesn't do anything.
Motionless, they say.
Can you imagine how creepy that is?
No, he doesn't move for over an hour.
That's creepy.
He just sits there. You know he's a psychopath.
Know it.
He doesn't show any signs of distress. He's just sitting there.
I know. We've talked about this before. You and I would be sweating bullets.
Oh my gosh.
So Carol Daly, who we talked about a lot in the first episode, as one of the first female police officers who was assigned to the sexual assault task force in Sacramento. She's one of the first people to hear the news. And she says in the interview of the show that it was pure relief and that she did not expect to hear this news in her lifetime.
Right.
They, on the show, speak to several victims. They talked to victim number 1 in Sacramento. Her name was Phyllis, who said that she started crying when she heard the news. They speak to victim number 10 named Chris, who says her emotions were overwhelming. She had all the emotions all at once. She said she was scared. What if she knew him? Well, turns out that victim number 10 and D'Angelo lived in the same neighborhood.
Within 2 minutes of each other.
He shopped at the same stores that she shopped at.
He could have been in line behind her at McDonald's, she said.
That's terrifying. And on April 25th, 2018, police announced that they had arrested 72-year-old Joseph D'Angelo, and he was, in fact, the Golden State Killer.
The East Area Rapist, the Visalia Ransacker.
Yeah.
The original Night Stalker.
Yeah.
He was all of them.
I love this line that the DA in Sacramento said. You want to say it, Tina?
We found the needle in the haystack, and it was right here in Sacramento.
So one of the most interesting interviews in the entire 7 episodes of the show, I think, is with somebody named Grant Gorman.
I agree.
Who lived behind Joseph D'Angelo.
The weasel.
His entire life. He said that Joe scared the entire neighborhood. They had a monster living behind them for his entire life and didn't even know it. He says one thing that really stood out to me. Finding out your next door neighbor of your entire life is a serial killer sends a jolt through you. You realize you don't know your neighbors and you don't know the people you think you do as well as you do. And I just wrote, I bet. That's terrifying. Police, FBI agents, tons and tons of people going through Joseph DeAngelo's house, his backyard. They're probing the backyard. Another neighbor said something interesting. So this guy named Kevin Tapia said that the day of the arrest was chaotic, but one of the strangest things was in Joseph DeAngelo's backyard, he had his granddaughter's playhouse, and there was a lock inside of the playhouse.
Yeah, like why do you need a lock in there?
Weird. Weird. So April 27th, 2018, DeAngelo is arraigned. And so a couple of days beforehand, he's cruising on his motorbike. He's out working on cars. And he doesn't even walk into the arraignment. He gets pushed into the arraignment in a wheelchair.
Looking all pathetic.
His eyes are squinty.
His voice is kind of hoarse.
He's just
he looks a little confused. Like his eyes are,
he did look confused.
He looks like his eyes are trying to fall asleep.
Yeah. Paul says this was 100% an act.
Absolutely.
And Grant Gorman, the neighbor, says that he knew that that's not the Joe he knew. He was definitely not a frail old man. We're going to get into a little timeline of Mr. Weasel's life.
Oh, boy.
Because I think this is fascinating.
It definitely is fascinating.
He was born in 1945, and his dad was in the military. And they moved to Mather Air Force Base in Sacramento, which was outside of some of the communities that he ended up sexually assaulting some of these people at. Paul says that Joseph DeAngelo served in the Navy during Vietnam as a diver.
Okay.
So in 1970, Joseph DeAngelo gets out of the Navy and he gets engaged to a woman named Bonnie. Now, Bonnie eventually broke up with him. We don't know why Bonnie broke up with him, but she did. And in one of the attacks in July of 78, while he was sexually assaulting a woman, he kept saying, "I hate you, Bonnie. I hate you, Bonnie." Can you imagine the wherewithal of this woman at the time? Like, there's something not right with this dude. I'm not gonna marry him. Like, power to you, Bonnie.
Yeah, good job, Bonnie. You spotted the psychopath.
1972, Joseph DeAngelo gets a degree in criminal justice. Later that year, he interns at the Roseville, California Police Department, which is 15 minutes away from Rancho Cordova, where he later commits some of his crimes. Then in 1973, he gets a job at the Exeter Police Department. Now, this is interesting to me because I've been to Exeter countless times. Exeter is a little tiny town right next to Visalia. We're talking a couple of minutes away from Visalia, where all these ransackings happened at. And it's a cute town, known for its murals, paintings on the side of walls, and it's known for it. And so in the show, they interview a former Exeter police officer who worked with the Weasel.
Yes.
Who says his name is Farrell Ward. And he looks like a cowboy to me.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. He looks like a cowboy. And he says when he met Joseph DeAngelo, who he referred to as Joe, he was engaged to a lady named Sharon Huddle. And he says that Joe was a super serious guy. He didn't laugh. And he would work patrols. And because the town is so tiny, they had single patrols. So there would literally be one police officer on duty for the entire town. And so he would kind of just pick and choose where he would go.
Right. So in 1974, the Weasel starts working daytime as a detective. So he's off work 5 p.m., which gives him the chance to prowl at night. And that's when the ransackings begin. In January of 1975, police in Exeter launched an anti-burglary task force, and the Weasel was selected to be the officer in charge of this task force.
That blows my mind.
He would go out and he would do the follow-up on the burglary calls.
The dude who is a couple of miles away committing
He's committing the crimes, then going back as the police officer to investigate the crimes.
I know, it's mind-boggling. December.
Paul says something important here.
Mm-hmm.
Paul says that the weasel is being paid by taxpayer money to become a better criminal, because they're sending him off to do trainings as well. And while he's doing these trainings in other areas, he's committing crimes, or he's staking out his next area to commit these crimes. December of 1975 is when McGowan
is shot in Visalia.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that's when that composite drawing is made that looks like D'Angelo while he's working as the Exeter police officer.
Right. And he sees this. He's like, oh, shoot. This, no pun intended, this drawing. That was terrible.
That was a terrible pun.
It's okay. McGowan lived, right?
McGowan lived.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he wasn't even shot. He was just hit by some
shrapnel.
Right.
I gotta get out of town.
The weasel notices that they've got, or sees that they have this drawing that looks like him. He's got to get out. And McGowan and the weasel had only been face to face with each other in that one incident where McGowan sees him at night trying to burgle someone.
Yep.
So, he knows at some capacity, this officer is going to see him in another officer capacity.
Well, listen to what happens in May of 76.
Okay.
Take it from there, Tina.
So in May of 1976, Exeter police chief retires, and a patrol sergeant from Visalia is brought in as the new chief. And this guy has been looking for the ransacker, and it's now his boss.
He's got to get out of Dodge.
Yep. There's a composite sketch that looks just like him.
McGowan might go visit that.
McGowan could come visit. There's a new police chief who's been hunting him. He's got to get out.
He's got to go.
So in 1976, June, this is a month later, the weasel is in Sacramento for law enforcement training. And that's when the East Area rapist cases began.
And 2 months later, he's hired by the Auburn Police Department. And Auburn is 30 minutes away from Sacramento. Now, I've been to Auburn. It's this cute little mining style town with like antique shops and restaurants. It's touristy. It's at the foothills. Like, you pass through it on your way if you're going toward like Tahoe, like up that way. And they speak to somebody on the show named Nicholas Wick, who is the former police chief for the Auburn Police Department. D'Angelo was working patrols, and Nicholas Wick was his boss while he was working patrol. And he describes D'Angelo very interesting. He says he's a below average cop.
Love it. I believe that.
I believe that too. And he has no substantial arrests. And Paul says something that I thought was interesting. He says that D'Angelo was not focused on being a police officer. He was putting his focus on prowling.
Makes sense.
Nicholas Wick says that he remembers a time when he saw D'Angelo during a traffic stop, and he kept touching the complainant, and that person would like back away from him, like, you're in my space, don't touch me. And he would like step forward and keep touching them.
Red flag.
Willick talked to him about it and was like, dude, you can't be doing that.
He didn't like it. He didn't like that he was told that. He said he pouted after hearing that, that the weasel went and pouted. Red flag again, a grown man pouting.
Yeah. Willick said that none of the sketches that he ever saw looked like D'Angelo. And in July of 79, Willick and the police department in Auburn got a call from the Sacramento Sheriff's Department that the weasel had been caught trying to steal a hammer and dog repellent spray from a store.
What an idiot.
He stuffed it in his pants.
Like he couldn't pay for it, but he didn't want to pay for it because he didn't want to look suspicious buying this stuff.
And there'd be some kind of like record. And Willick says you can't have a police officer accused of stealing things, so D'Angelo was fired. Paul Holes says that there are thoughts and suspicions that the weasel was conditioning dogs before the sexual assaults. Like he would go and spray the dogs with like dog mace or things so the dog wouldn't go near him.
Right.
Because some of these victims had dogs and the dogs apparently didn't act the way that the owner suspected they would.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have dogs, and if somebody were to break into my house, I know at least one of my dogs would go after somebody.
Right.
In November of 79, a jury found D'Angelo guilty of shoplifting, and that's it. D'Angelo moves out of the area. And that's when the attacks start happening in Southern California.
In 1980, the weasel and his wife buy a house in Sacramento, but crimes are happening in Southern California.
So we don't know, is he driving back and forth? We know at some point in time he's living in Southern California, but we don't know.
Right.
And it's not like this is just like a hop, skip, and a jump. Like Sacramento to Southern California is at least 350 miles. Like it's a ways.
Right. He worked after he was done with his police officer job, or after they let him go.
Fired him.
He worked as a mechanic. He was a diver for PG&E, pulling up sump pumps.
I don't know what a sump pump is.
I don't either. Some sort of...
It's underwater.
Sure. September 1981 is the birth of the weasel's first daughter, which is shortly after Sherry Domingo and Greg Sanchez were killed.
And then there's that 5-year gap.
That's right, where no one knows what's been going on.
Maybe he was too busy with the baby.
Possibly, I suppose, but I don't see him really contributing much. He doesn't seem like a family man to me.
Yeah. So May of 1986, Janelle Cruz is killed. In November of 1986, D'Angelo's second daughter is born in LA. So like, you know, they're living somewhere in like Southern California at that time. Mm-hmm. His third daughter is born 3 years later in Sacramento in 1989.
Something chilling, I think, that he had 3 daughters.
Why?
Because he was a sexual assaulter of women.
See, and this is where the whole wife thing comes into it for me. What did she know? I know we'll get into that because her family also had a history of prowling behaviors, but I just find this so odd. 1989, they're back in Sacramento, and that's when D'Angelo starts working as a grocery store delivery driver. And he's basically living a quiet life in Sacramento until the day of his arrest.
I mean, he was terrorizing neighbors here and there, being a weirdo.
Yeah, he was probably prowling. And in 1991, D'Angelo's wife, Sharon Huddle, files for divorce, but it was never finalized. Yeah. Which I also find it interesting that the wife is a divorce attorney.
Yeah, she's a smart lady. Sure, I mean, you have to be an attorney. So what did she know? But she moves out of the house around that time.
She moves out, but they never got divorced. Paul believes that he was no longer committing sexual crimes, but he was still prowling, peeping through windows kind of to get a thrill. And we also know that he was still calling his victims for the thrill of it all. In 2001, he called victim number 14 of the East Area rape attacks in Sacramento and was taunting her over the phone. He called her 24 years later. He tracked her down and he called her and said, "Remember when we played?" and hung up.
So he's still a psychopath, clearly.
Yeah. The neighbor, Grant Gorman, said that he grew up playing with D'Angelo's kids and they were sometimes happy, sometimes not so happy. Said that one time Joe called their house and actually left a death threat on their answering machine. Remember answering machines?
Yes, and that's why I say he was still terrorizing his neighbors.
He apparently, D'Angelo didn't identify himself on the phone, but the dad knew, Grant Gorman's dad knew right away who it was. And he threatened the family. And I don't want to even say what he said because it's just disgusting. The Grant's family. And apparently Grant's dad went into the backyard and started yelling for D'Angelo to come outside because he wanted to fight him because nobody threatens his family.
Right.
And Grant said that his dad was out there ready to go, and D'Angelo refused and went back into his house. A total coward.
Yeah, that's what he called him.
Mm-hmm. I think the big thing is a lot of people want to know, what did his wife know?
Yeah.
Can you imagine? So we know they were engaged when he was down in Exeter in the police department. They were engaged at the time. And they got married.
In 1973.
In 73. And they were married throughout this entire spree.
Yeah.
How in the world does she not know? If my husband was leaving the house constantly at random hours of the night, I'd be like, where are you going? What are you doing?
Find My Friends these days is super helpful.
What?
Find My Friends.
What is that?
Jen, you don't have like your friends and your family on Find My Friends?
I have like Find My iPhone.
Well, okay, it's similar, except you find your friends. So this is helpful with my husband. I know where he is. I know when he's coming home. I know when to start dinner. I know if I haven't heard from him and he's on a road trip, I can see and make sure that he's still driving and he's safe so I don't freak out.
Fascinating.
So fascinating.
She needed to Find My Friend at the time.
I know. If I have my mom and Find My Friends, I can tell where she is. So if she's not answering my phone call, I can see like, what the heck, Mom? Where are you at? And I'm like, oh, okay. She's still at work. She's usually home by now, but she's still at work. I understand. I'll leave her alone. But it's helpful.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay,
I have my sister on there. If my sister's coming down to visit me, I want to make sure that her trip is safe. So I just keep tabs on her, make sure that, she's still driving and that nothing has delayed her trip or whatever. Yeah.
Learn something new every day. How is he juggling his time? He's a police officer. He's married. He's a criminal.
He's got children at some point.
At some point. I would be suspicious if my husband was gone. And the show interviews a lady named Leslie D'Ambrosia. I think that's how you pronounce it. I think ambrosia is like a salad. Anyway.
Okay.
So they interview Leslie D'Ambrosia, who's a criminal profiler. And she says that apparently the Weasel's wife's father was arrested for peeping when she was little. And so maybe she thought this was the norm.
Oh my gosh, that's so crazy.
I mean, I feel like she has terrible taste in men.
Well, I mean, her dad, she couldn't help that.
But still, though.
They do say you marry people like your father.
A big thing in this whole spree is that the souvenirs, the Weasel's trophies from these crime scenes have never been found. Paul Holes has a sneaky suspicion that the Weasel, who we know was a fisherman, and he had a boat of his own, he might have weighed down these souvenirs and would like revisit them on fishing trips. I don't think that's too out there.
No, I do have one theory about his wife, what she knew.
Yeah.
So it is mentioned in the show, someone had visited his house. One of his colleagues at some point came over and either noticed or the Weasel had mentioned that his wife and him had separate bedrooms.
That's weird.
Even as newlyweds, they had separate bedrooms is what this guy says. That's weird. Which means if she went to bed, at a specific time in a separate bedroom, she wouldn't have noticed maybe if he left the house because he was in another bedroom.
So what, is she going to bed at like 7, 8 p.m.? Because some of his crimes happened at 8 p.m.
Please, Jen, what time do you go to bed? I know you go to bed early.
I do go to bed early.
All right. So this is not far off, from what could have happened. And in the 70s, what is there to do? You can't play on TikTok all night. You can't watch, good movies on TV. I'm sure that TV fuzz came on probably after 9 p.m. or something. I mean, what is there to do to entertain yourself after a certain hour?
I don't know. I'm sure there was things. So the crimes overall happened in 6 different counties throughout the state of California. All the DAs from all of these counties where these crimes occurred got together. And they
finally,
I know, right? They determined that the trial for the Weasel is going to take place in the state capitol up in Sacramento. 2 kidnapping charges were also brought against him for case number 9 and 10, which I don't know if those are the Sacramento cases. The show did not specify that.
Right.
And in August of 2020, Joseph DeAngelo, the Weasel, accepted a plea bargain for the killings and several counts of kidnapping and was sentenced to multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
He's going to die in prison. Genetic genealogy. There you go. It reminds me of that Genie. Like, remember that I Dream of Genie show? Genealogy.
Yeah. See, that's funny where you go with it. You're thinking of the I Dream, whatever
I
show.
Dream of Genie.
And I'm thinking of Genie in a Bottle.
Oh, by Christina Aguilera.
Yeah.
If you want to be with me.
That's the one.
So it helped solve this case. And like we said, it's helping solve new cases. It's solving old cases. Mm-hmm. But
I do have a thought on the genealogy.
Give it to me.
Not even the genealogy stuff, just the DNA stuff.
Give it to
me. You know, at some point these laws were enacted to forcibly make the felons have their DNA put into this database.
Yeah.
I also think people who have certain power or authority, powers.
You mean like witchy stuff, or
no,
what kind of powers?
No. Where our brains are so different. I'm talking about law enforcement, like people of authority who have power over other citizens or other people should also have to submit their DNA to stuff.
Really?
So that stuff like this doesn't happen.
I feel like this is a very rare thing, though.
Yeah, but it happened. For over 40 years, this guy eluded law enforcement. And he would have been caught right away.
He would have
if
been.
He was in a database.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it keeps people in check. If you have certain power, like this kind of has a way of keeping you in check, keeping authorities in check, keeping the people in power in check so that you don't go crazy. What if you're a psychopath too? You know, like how do they screen for psychopaths if you're in some power position? Do they?
I don't think they do.
Well, they should.
How do you test that though? Like, how do you whittle those people out?
That's what I'm saying, Jen. If you can't do it that way, maybe there's other ways, like, you know, to keep you from committing craziness.
Oh, I don't know about this, Tina.
All right.
I don't know about this. I love you, but I don't know about this. Before we close out the show, there's 2 points of fact that I want to make. Nicholas Wick, the former police chief of Auburn Police Department who worked with DeAngelo, says that in the show Unmasking a Killer, which we watched on Max, that since the day of the arrest, not a single day has gone by that he does not thought of this case. He wonders if he missed something. It's difficult, he says, for him to know how a person can do this, let alone somebody like DeAngelo, who he knew, how he could do that. Willick says that he believes we all owe a lot to Paul Holes, the Sacramento DA's office, the Sacramento Sheriff's Department, the FBI. Just a lot of thanks because they never let this die. They finally, after over 4 decades, gave a little bit of sense of closure to families and to the victims. Mm-hmm. It's also, I think, I want to end the show by saying that as of February 2025, Joseph DeAngelo sits in a cell at Corcoran State Prison, which is a 43-minute drive to Visalia, where the ransacker cases happened. He's back in the area where it all started, but instead of being free, he's now locked up like a little rat in a little cell.
And hallelujah.
I am glad he's there, you know?
Yeah.
And that these people finally have some closure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And with that,
thank you so much for joining us.
It's time for us to close.
It's well done. We will see you again next week. All right. You ready?
Yeah.
Bye.